Hello, chess friends. Today I'd like to cover a very interesting topic, and this is, can we crush the Sicilian? Now, to be really honest with you, that answer seems fairly complicated, because really just there's no way to crush any opening. I mean, not physically at least. Yet, there are certain things or tricky ideas that you may know about how you could potentially get to a position that will allow you to get a great opening advantage. So this is what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to show you a couple of my own secrets. In fact, this is one of the games that, this includes one of my games that I was able to defeat a very strong international master and win an incredible open tournament, my first open tournament that I won. Basically, when you're playing against a Sicilian, you got to know that people will play different lines, and there is almost no way to predict what the opponent's going to do. Yet there is a way to predict your own development and sort of set it up so it can go better. Essentially, after knight f3, people can do different things. Now, the most common moves are, of course, e6, d6, and knight d6, so we're going to talk about them. But because I want to introduce you to what I would call the Maroczy Bind, let's also talk about a move of a6. Now, what is a6? a6 is the O'Kelly variation, and in my opinion, that is the easiest way for you to take an advantage simply by playing the move of c4. If you do it this way, what's going to happen is that you could take away his ability of playing b5, and by taking that away from black, you could get a very, very comfortable position. So, for instance, if black plays supposedly a move like knight c6, you can play with the move d4, c6 to the d4, knight x to the d4, and then you could realize the beauty of it, because like after knight x to the d4, the e4 and c4 form what I would call the Maroczy Bind, but it's really the cut off from b5 and d5 that we do that's actually allowing white to be so extremely successful. Without moves like d5 and b5, black's own structure just feels very, very difficult. And I'm not going to say to you that he's like losing or anything like that, because obviously that's not true. It's just that in case he plays knight f6 and then knight c3, d6, and then bishop e2, we're getting the Maroczy Bind that everybody would love. It's just a position in which black's major moves, like in terms of d5 and b5, are being actually prevented. And due to that, ultimately, after moves like e6 and then, like short castles, bishop e7 and bishop e3, we're getting basically the most perfect structure that could actually be there. We've got space, we've got activity, we've got the action figures. And now one may argue that there are ways in how black could get a good game, and there are. I don't want to say anything against it. There are ways to get a good game. Possibly by playing the move of bishop to the d7 right now, and really trying to realize a faster development, like with rook c8. The trouble of this is that it's just such a difficult game that if you think about it, after moves like f3, supposedly rook e8, and moves like even rook after the d1, this is the kind of position in which basically everything's great for white. There is almost no place for a quick counterplay by black. b5 can almost never be done in the short run, and so white will use that to keep a great challenge or different type of pressure versus black in his development. It is a really nice setup. So what can black do eventually in this type of position? What are the options? Well, actually, after that move, maybe black can try queen to the c7, hoping that eventually this is going to free up his the place for his rook, like rook to the d8. But then after the move of rook to the d8, now after bishop f1, let's say, or rook to the d8, and then queen to f2, you can see how well prepared white is against any of those activities. There's no tactic that black can do. d5 or b5 are still taken. And I mean, there are plenty of different ways on how this position can develop depending on what black is doing. It's just that even if you don't know so much the theory of it, you can always figure it out. because of the great amount of space, activity, and the actions that we can keep against black, it's almost easy. I like to say that it's almost very, very simple and very easy to arrange the rest of the pieces to the point of where we can attack against them or do other kind of stuff. It's that's why I really do like that kind of position. Apparently, black's options are limited in here, but I mean, I would say that the major difficulty for him is the fact that he cannot find any active counterplay. That's where the problem comes. Active counterplay is one of the most important necessities of any player in any position, and when it's not there, when the active counterplay just doesn't exist or it's just not well supported, it's just bad. Imagine b6 now, and then white can even play with a move like, say, h3. That will, of course, be done in support to a move like f4 that could very easily come through, and it can just help white to drive away black's knight and help him out with plenty of the attacks. It's that kind of position in which you feel the trouble, and yet there is nothing that black can do in order to change this. It's just a very hard to play that kind of position in here. Maybe you can try knight g6, but this could actually allow you even to play g4. I don't want to necessarily tell you play g4 because that would be a little too much, but still, you can do this. And then you can know that by playing this type of move, you have got a lot of the necessary backup that is really there, and it's actually showing. There's going to be further on the possibility, an excellent possibility, of bishop g2. There's going to be f4, which we can make so quickly and so easily, and then there's going to be a lot of the the other moves like king h1 and many others that will play a great role towards white's position there. So the setup, the center, the activity of the pieces, it's all up there and going. With that in mind, black could do a move like queen to the b8. I do want to say that. You can try this, but again, I just don't feel like this is too perfect. Now, be careful about the bishop g2 because that could potentially allow the opponent to go with a move like pawn up to the b5, and I don't think that you lose if this happens. It's just that we don't want to allow black to ever come down and realize different tactics of that kind. So we just want to take the chance and really keep him a little prevented, a little off. So if he doesn't have moves like pawn to the b5 or d5, it'll be a lot more difficult for him to make any sort of counterplay. Now, white has different ways to plan. You can plan on the king side, you can plan in the center with rook d2, rook c2, or rook c d1. It's up to you how you do it. It's really up to you. There's no perfect way to do that. It's just that I feel like, when it's done like that, when white really has the preparation and the build-up and the restriction over black's position, we could allow ourselves a little bit more time, a little bit more preparation to do it the way we want it, the way you feel your position, or wherever you feel your position is going to be most valuable, most powerful. So yeah, I mean that's my thinking in terms of the line to follow. Of course, there's also going to be a move like a4 which we can do, and that's done for a number of reasons. Most important reason is because we could just take away the b5 square in this way and stop him from like just ever reaching out and expanding on the queen side. In case of bishop e8, there could be a move of f4 that we do, and it's really quite beautiful. Now, I know that I've been talking to you a lot about this system, because a lot of, the truth is many people would never play a6. They'll just go knight c6, d6, and e6. So let's talk about d6. What you can do if they go with d6. That's possible. Now, here is the trick. When black does go with a move like pawn to d6, you can just go d4 normally. Now, of course, what he'll do is c6 to the d4, knight x to the d4, and knight f6. And that's okay. Don't you worry about that. It's fine. This position is not so good for him. And the reason is because you can play f3. Now, here is how you're making it to work. By playing the move of pawn to f3, we're ultimately taking the chance to restrict him. And I mean, this is really big time. We're taking the chance to restrict him. We're taking the possibility to really limit a lot of the black opportunities. And by doing so, by taking away most of his, we could say chances or resources or whatever you call it, you name it, we get also the idea of planning up and breaking with a move of pawn to c4. Now, certainly that doesn't mean that black should give us that opportunity. And in fact, most times he's probably not going to want to do that. One of his ways to play it is eventually knight c6. If he wants to do it, he could do it like this. Knight c6, getting ready. Of course, we can play c4 in this position. And this is the sort of first idea on how we understand white's qualities here. By playing it just like that, white gets the same structure that we already talked about, the very same formation. We're also getting it in a quick way, a quick version of it. Moves like d5 and b5 are no longer possible, so black really cannot make them. Or even if he does, it's not going to be that easy. If he does bishop to the e7, white can do bishop e3, castles bishop e2. And, there's other ways to go about that too, but knight c2 or so. I mean, I believe that a lot of people would try e5. This is basically black's way to fight this off. e5 makes sense because it forces the white knight to move out of the d4, very interestingly. And then if this happens, eventually, white will lose quite a bit of his, pressure there with his knight moving out of the way, potentially on a backside position. That's not good. However, the interesting thing about f3 is the move of bishop b5. And I remember when I first played that against an international master, he was rated over 2470 or so. Very strong player. That was my first strong 2400 over player. He played bishop d7 against me. I exchanged. He took back with his queen, actually, and I remember I played knight f5 against him, g6, and then I played bishop g5, and this was really the time where it was incredibly difficult for my opponent to find out what to do. I believe he played something like queen d8, and then after knight e3, it was basically almost the end of it because he had to worry about the f6, he had to worry about his king, and he had to worry about the d5 and as well as the d6 pawn. It's like all those things suddenly happened on black's head while he was totally unprepared. He really didn't know what to do or where to go. There are moves like knight c3 plus d5, but there's also queen d2 plus long side castles that white is actually setting up to do. And it's so wonderful. So beautiful to play this. What I find exciting is the fact that there was never a chance for for my opponent to do anything really that great. He had to do bishop e7, and then of course we had the move of knight of the c3, and then there's queen of the d2, and just it's amazing. It's like really powerful to follow it like that, and there's not much of an opportunity for black to do anything else. So I gotta tell you that it is really interesting as this comes up. What really sets it forward with the f6 pressure, with the d5 control, and with the rest of those pieces really into play, there was not much that black could do. It was really interesting. Good development, easy setup, and now we've got the d5 some square under control. Black was in trouble. Of course, he could just castle. He could consider doing it like that. It's an opportunity for sure. But what do we do next? See, so actually after that move, white could even play with the move of bishop to h6, and then you can understand the idea. It's a really great variation. It was just a very powerful move, and not much that black could do. See, going even backward in this case, just going backward in that position, it is really amazing. The setup, the activity, the tactics, knight f5. Now, the truth is that one of the theoretical variations is that black could do d5 here, and that's okay. See, the d5 is done so that basically black could try and break through in the center, so that we don't get the chance to counter. But then this could be met very easily by bishop to the g5, and you could understand the reality of white's threats coming in. The bishop jumps in quite quickly, and then it creates a threat on the f6. If black plays d takes d, there's bishop takes f6, queen takes d1, king takes d1, g takes h, g takes f, pawn takes e4, and now you realize that it's that knight on f5 that's through the f through the c3 incredibly well. There's knight d5 that can be done. It's all those great things, and black has a terrible endgame due to his awful bishop and all the other pieces that just really feel misplaced in that moment. It's so good. Knight c6, c3. And that was really a wonderful thing. The first time when I saw that line, it was like from one of the strongest players in my age group. He later on went to become a grandmaster. But I was really impressed, and I felt like I really wanted to do it this way, to play it the same way he did. And it worked. It's just that I had this incredible success of playing this line so many times in my own games. So it was great. Rook g8, g3, and it's perfect. Now, the correct theoretical line is that black basically gets to do knight takes to the d7, knight to the d7, immediately knight b d7. Now the point being is that after white jumps in like this, black should be ready to sack the pawn with something like d5 in order to offer it, essentially. And then as soon as white accepts the sacrifice, that could mean that black will do actually the move of, like a6, forcing the, like this, the exchange. So in case of the take, there could be a good recapture. And it's a pretty decent position, we could almost say. So it works, right? Yeah, it kind of looks like it does work in this type of position. But, in this particular case, and the way and how this goes, white can just play bishop takes d7 or bishop a4. I think either one of these is going to work. And then in the end, after knight e3 is played, b5, and then of course we have knight to the c3. Now, if you look more closely, if you look more carefully to that, you will probably find out the major problem that black would experience, and this is that the d5 pawn is not just that pawn that's being attacked, it's everything else too. It's like, okay, there's an issue, but also the white knight is coming out to the e4. It's like black is going to feel a little behind. Very strong. Now, there is initiative that works as a compensation for black. That is true. But there is not too much. Even when he accepts the pawn, if the queen takes to the d and then bishop e3, still white has a good position. The other line that I like is after that, if you won, you might consider doing the move of bishop a4. And then the idea here is to preserve the pawn for a little bit longer with knight e3, bishop c5, knight c3 here, and then even queen to the d3. So you're really like going to make black to work a little harder to actually return the material disadvantage. Maybe a move like rook c8, but then we can play just a move like c3. And again, I believe there deeply that there is a way of black how he could take the pawn back. Most likely he will do it at the right time. It's just that now, for example, in this theoretical line, white is going to get the bishop pair advantage, a pretty solid challenge against the black d5, and also the possibility to develop his pieces real fast. So you could see it doesn't really matter that black takes it. White has already taken quite a bit of value and opportunities because of all the different pieces he set up against black. So it's a wonderful position, great setup, and a development that seems to play off really well. Black plays queen b6, there's going to be bishop e3, bishop takes knight next to the e3, queen next to the e3. It's just a couple of nice exchanges. Then we have the d file available, and then we've got other moves like rook d2, rook d1, and so on and so forth that will just play off, incredibly well, the way we want it, the way we need it. So I gotta admit that this is one of my favorite lines, and it continues to be mostly for the reason of, the build up, the real way on how we set the pieces together and we actually make them to work. It was just excellent. It's like really, really good. Now, surely there are other ways. I mean, of course, after the d6 f3, black may choose between allowing c4 or not. But what happens if Géza plays e6? Now, this is probably the line that I want to show you most of, because of my experience with it, and in particular, certain things that I've had the ability to witness. When people play e6, of course, the idea with f3 doesn't work. If we play d4, c takes d, knight takes d, black will just likely do knight f6. And then in case of f3, d5, it's just not working. We don't have the chance to play it. But we could be tricky. In this case, we could actually play c4 early. Now, d5 does not work here. It's too early for black to play it. And should you do it, after e takes to the d, e takes to the d, exchange and retake, we could just drive that queen back and, play d4. So this is really going to be very advantageous for white. He can make moves like bishop b5 check, short castles, rook e1, and you name it. It's just a lot of great development that will come into play. So white could take a lot of qualities, major advantage of this whole sequence. For this reason, I would expect that black will just play knight c6, knight c3. Or actually, you can play d4 directly. Otherwise, you could close the center with e5. So let's play with the move of d4. He take, we retake, knight f6 and knight c3, and that is the kind of unique position that we're going to meet, which I find unique for a number of reasons, but the most important one is because we've already said the Maroczy. Now, if black plays d6, this is really easy. d6 leads to the structures that we've already talked about, where we have that c4 pawn really guaranteeing as much of the space and the perfect development underneath with the queen, the bishops, the rooks, and so on and so forth. That's wonderful. Now, the trouble line, the troublesome variation could potentially be the move of bishop to b4. And that's a good question because, it almost looks like after bishop to the b4, we're going to have to worry. So, do we? Almost. See, if we play knight x to the c6 here, you will easily equalize the game. So I don't believe that it's going to give us all too much. But if we play with the move of knight to b5, that whole thing may never come through. The whole idea of black may actually never become available. The idea of knight db5 is simple. It defends the knight on c3, but it also sets us up for the move of knight to d6 check. And as you can see, this is a wonderful idea because if black plays with something like a6, knight d6 check, now in case of the exchange and recapture, we're perfect. But more importantly, if he doesn't do the exchange, if he plays with king e7, then bishop f4, I'd say that white has already achieved a pretty valuable, pretty effective development. Now, going back, sometimes people would just ignore this and then just play short castles altogether. In that case, we can do a3. And again, bishop e7 just leads to nothing, as we could pretty quickly do knight d6 or bishop d3 and prepare it. Or, if he exchanges with bishop takes the c3, knight takes the c3, I mean, this whole strategy for black of playing bishop b4 really failed. It didn't lead to anything good for him. So, suggesting that, black has to take the e4 pawn is almost like necessary because he's got to do it. If he's ever going to get the chance to, make something more dangerous, he has to take the pawn in order to possibly grab a chance to attack c3 and keep the extra tension. It's a normal move. Queen g4, knight x to c3, b takes to the c3, bishop f8. So what do we really do in this particular case? It's a good question. The way we go, I mean, I've had the chance to play this position myself a couple of times, and The strong way to go is queen to g3. I find it quite perfect. For a couple reasons, but the most important of them being the fact that now white is actually setting up for a very strong attack. It's knight c7, being that backed up by both the queen and the knight that will actually go in there. Now black's got a problem because if should he choose to play with a move like say d6, we got c5 on the line. And then we see that the threat on the d6 is also backed up by the idea of playing knight c7 check should he choose to capture. Of course, he might play a6, but then we have knight takes the d6, bishop takes d, pawn takes d, and then when he castles, I still don't believe that this is really going to feel like a very comfortable position for black after bishop d3. And surely there are different ways to play it, like for instance bishop a3 could be done, e5, and then rook d1, which may even turn out stronger in that case if you think about it. After queen g3, black's obvious way in this case then should be e5, a normal stopping move with the idea to hold us back so we don't get to reach the d6 nor c7. Seems to work, seems to be pretty good. And that's where white plays c5, and this is what I did against the international master who I got to play. The interesting part here is that if black takes bishop takes c5, and he did that against me actually, I played queen takes g7, rook f8, and you realize that after bishop e3, this is a very difficult position to play. Mostly it is because if black plays with a move of bishop takes e3, there's going to be knight d6 check, king e7, knight f5 check here, and we can even take the e3, and yes, black is a pawn up, but it's such a bad position of his king, and a lot of the other pieces that he's got on the downside are fairly down, that it doesn't look like he's going to get anything good here. Going back, the idea is also that after we play it like this, in case of the c5, apparently bishop takes g, queen takes g7, this is going to be pretty bad. So I'm guessing he could try a different move, and it could be g6. Now what do we do after black plays g6? After black plays g6, we can play with the move of bishop to the g5, and that's perfect. The lovely idea of this move is that apparently if black moves his queen out of the way, we're going to get the dark squares perfectly controlled with bishop f6. But more importantly, if should he choose bishop e7, we got knight d6 and we catch him off guard completely. This is a very difficult position, mostly due to the fact that, he's undeveloped. And then the rest of his pieces are just going to be very bad. I mean, you could see that for yourself. It's like he cannot make bishop e6, cannot make anything but king f8, and then there's going to be bishop to the h6, and it's just really difficult. Possibly, not necessarily, but possibly he can try f6 in this moment, hoping to grab a chance and set up some activity. But even that one does not work in my opinion, because if should he choose to play it, white can even come down with a move like queen f3. And what's wonderful about that, it looks like a crazy move, but what's wonderful about that is that if black takes the bishop now, there's bishop c4. It creates an inevitable checkmating threat on f7, which almost instantly forces the black queen to go out and move to e7. Then white's got queen to knight to the d6, king d8, and then knight f7 check. King c7, and then knight takes to h8, which really loads a perfect position for white. Again, black certainly has got some compensation maybe after playing a move of queen takes to the c5, but if you could see it, white's knight will easily find its way out through the f7 square, and it's still going to be a lot of time before black could actually prove any real advantage for his position or anything real. He has got a problem. A lot of his pieces are definitely on the downside, and I don't want to say that it's losing for black. I just want to say that it is fairly difficult in this position, actually. This is pretty important. So yeah, getting to see this position and play it out was really brilliant for me. I played it, and then I played it against a top grandmaster online, and what that top grandmaster did was, I think, one of the best variations. And that's actually the move of knight f6. This is with the idea that if he like lets that queen take g7, black could actually take the shot and counter. That makes that sense. After that, here, queen h6, and then rook to the g6, he pushed me back. But then again, I feel like white has a very good game. In case of queen to the d2, we could be going for moves like knight d6, and or even queen f4 can be played too. Black can try e5, white can move his queen back there, even towards the d2. Now we've created this bit of an isolated pawn out there, and there are plenty of versions on how white can fight for initiative, including the idea of doing bishop to the d3 and a bit of a sacrifice, or maybe just a3, bishop takes the c, b takes the c, and we have some options. It's a challenging line, but I believe that overall it's quite interesting, and it could catch black pretty off guard as if we play it this way. That's the idea, to make it work, and I hope you're successful with it.